Hey, what's up, Art Geeks? Today, I want to talk a little bit about atmosphere. And this piece that I'm working on today has quite a bit of that atmosphere happening around the subject. So, before we get into that, I just want to quickly mention that I do have a bunch of Patreon tutorials. Go check that out if you want to learn more about portrait painting. There's tutorials, there's art downloads, there's some other things on there that'll really help you in your journey to becoming a better portrait painter. Now that I got that shameless plug out of the way, let's get back to what I was talking about. The atmosphere of artwork is something I am constantly thinking about when I create a piece. This work in particular is pretty straightforward. It's just a person in the middle looking down, but I decided to add just a little bit of fog to the lower part of the painting. It gives that feeling of her being submerged in something, whether it's water or maybe a dense fog, but it creates this nice atmosphere that I jump right into at the very beginning of this painting just to get a general idea of what it's going to do for the overall piece. Now, just to help guide the topic of this discussion on atmosphere, I decided to ask the good old ChatGPT for a couple bullet points to see what it thinks. And I just simply asked ChatGPT, how does subtle atmosphere change the feeling of artwork? And it gave me about 8 points, and we're just going to go through those really quick. Here's the headline, though, from ChatGPT. It says, subtle changes in atmosphere can significantly impact the overall feeling and perception of artwork. The atmosphere of an artwork is influenced by various elements such as color, lighting, and composition and mood. Okay, well, I think that's a good start by ChatGPT. I think that the mood is definitely something that can affect the atmosphere. I think this work that I'm doing right now, just by changing the slight composition towards the lower quarter of the painting and making that sort of fog, really adds something to the story of the work. What that story is really up to the viewer of the work, but it leads people down a path when they see this. Now, that was just the headline from ChatGPT. Let's get into the first bullet point that it mentions here, and it talks about color palette. And it says the choice of colors sets the mood of an artwork. Warm colors like reds and yellows may create a sense of warmth. Cool colors like blues and greens can convey calmness and tranquility. I like that word, tranquility. Thanks for throwing that in there, ChatGPT. Now, is color alone the only thing that will affect the mood or the atmosphere? I don't think so. I think it's a big part. You can feel warmth and calmness no matter what color you really throw at it, depending on the balance of those colors. So isolated by itself, color palette does have something to do with it, but you could easily adjust the mood just by changing the overall tones to the painting. Now, the next one, lighting, is very important when it comes to atmosphere. You could have a spotlight on your subject and have one mood. You could have a very nice diffused window light hitting your subject and have a whole different mood to it, a whole different atmosphere. Lighting is probably more important than anything else when it comes to the mood or the atmosphere of your painting. For my work, I find that having a balance of lighting over the face is key to creating the right atmosphere. If you have too much brightness hitting the whole face, you lose a lot of the shape of the face. If you have too much shadow, you don't get enough detail that way either. So it's good to have a good balance. It's good to have a nice angle to the lighting. And another aspect to lighting that I find is very interesting to use is when you have the subject interacting with the light, where you have the subject looking into the light or looking away from the light can also add to the atmosphere and the feeling of the artwork just by having that subtle act of awareness of the lighting from the subject. Now, the third one is composition from ChatGPT, and this one is right up there for me. This one is right there with lighting as far as what can create atmosphere. But what is composition? It's just the arrangement of elements, whether it's the tonal values and how you arrange those, where the subject is located, where the colors are located. All of these things have a effect on the overall composition. How these things are all balanced will have an effect on the composition. If we were to take this in the most simplest terms, where you have a subject sitting in the middle of your panel, but you change the background to a white background, all of a sudden the atmosphere feels lighter, it feels more positive, and you get a different vibe from that light background. Now, if you were to slowly darken the background, if you were to go to subtle midtones you will notice that the mood changes and the atmosphere changes. If you change it to a very black background, all of a sudden the feeling you get from the painting, the mood will get a little bit more haunting. All of these simple things where you don't even do anything more than just change the background tone will affect the mood. Then you can add another layer to that where you add a little bit of color, a little bit of variation of light and darks, and all of a sudden you get more and more complex with the atmosphere and the mood of your painting. The next one from ChatGPT is pretty interesting. It's texture. And I can see where this one could affect the overall atmosphere. If you have a very smooth textured surface, you have a lot of subtle transitions between light and dark. Maybe you even soften the sharpness of your portrait, like this one in particular that I'm painting today. It gives a different feeling to the atmosphere. It feels like you're looking through something, you're looking through a fog, or the subject is out of focus, and that can create a mood to it a little bit. But if you increase the sharpness, if you add detail to your painting, it'll feel like they are in an environment that isn't quite as thick with atmosphere. So that can really affect the overall outcome of your painting. And other things like adding a lot of texture, throwing a lot of brush strokes in over certain parts of the painting, that can create a sense of movement and a different atmosphere just by adding a lot of painterly brush strokes. So all these things can really affect the overall feeling of your work and the overall atmosphere. Now, the next one from ChatGPT, which I find to be interesting, is scale. Now, if I think about this, if I think about how scale can affect the atmosphere, especially with my work, I would say this painting in particular, because we are so close up to the subject, it really doesn't allow you as much of an opportunity to have a lot of atmosphere or to show what the atmosphere is doing. So the key for me with this one to create some atmosphere was to really play up that lower quarter of the painting, to have that transition between the dark top and the slightly less dark bottom. And it creates some movement around the subject within those subtle tonal shifts. So that was the way to get some atmosphere at this close up scale with the subject. Now, on the opposite end of the spectrum, say I zoomed out and you could see the whole subject from head to toe. I'm working on a painting now where the subject is floating in space and you can see the whole subject in the middle of the work. And this gives me a lot of opportunities to play around with atmosphere, to make the atmosphere more of the star of the show. This also creates a larger scale to the overall environment that I can play with. So this can create a lot more mystery with the environment the subject is in. All right, now the next one is contrast, and I think this one is very interesting, and I'm trying to think how this one is affected in my work. So when I paint, I like to go all the way from dark to light. If there isn't one spot that isn't full black and another area that's full white, then I feel like I haven't given the painting everything I can. So when this comes to mood or atmosphere, I think that if you have a painting where you don't go full black to full white or use the full spectrum of tone range, I think that your atmosphere may feel a little bit more calm. But when you use the whole range, when you go from black to white, especially when you go across a subject's face, that can really increase the drama, that can really change the mood in a lot of different ways. There is really no set way that that is going to affect the mood, but it is going to definitely change the overall atmosphere and mood just by playing with those different contrast levels, how the light hits the face, how the lighting affects the overall contrast. All of these things go into contrast, and all of them can really affect the overall atmosphere of your painting. All right, now this next one I really like from ChatGPT because it's something I think about a lot when it comes to my work, and that is detailing. I love to have some detail in my work, but I also love to have some nice loose brush strokes and nice abstraction with very low detail to create a certain atmosphere. So with this work towards the end, especially when I get into some more color, you're going to see that the atmosphere is going to change a little bit. You're going to see that all the color I add is changing the atmosphere. The looseness of the brush strokes is going to create a little bit more of an ethereal feel to the atmosphere. The lower quarter of this painting has that etherealness to it because it has some nice, smooth, sweeping brush marks to really amping up the overall atmosphere, make it feel more immersive for the subject. Now, on the opposite end of where all the loose brushwork is happening in this painting is the detail. And the only detail I really have is with the nose and the mouth. Everything else is very loose, very abstract, but that's what draws you in. By having so much atmosphere happening everywhere else, you are naturally drawn to that part of the face that you can actually recognize. And that is where atmosphere can really up the engagement level for the viewer. All right, so the next one that's got me really thinking here, number 8, the final one, is cultural and symbolic references. So I don't get into cultural references too much with my work. I know a lot of people do, but that's not really my thing with my work. But the symbolic references, I guess for me, when it comes to this painting in particular, I would say all the atmosphere that's happening around the subject really reinforces that the subject is isolated. They're at some sort of crossroads and they don't know where they're going next. And I think the atmosphere really helps to create that symbolic feeling of being alone in your own thoughts and trying to figure out where you go next. So I think these were all really good. I think that ChatGPT did a really good job of starting a discussion. I love this impromptu method of just letting ChatGPT lead the way, but then I jump to all these different subjects that I don't really plan for. So let me know what you think. I'm really enjoying it so far doing it this way. And just really quick, I want to mention again, check out my Patreon page if you want to learn a little bit more about my painting practice. You'll learn a lot about portrait painting, abstraction, composition, color theory, all those good things, art downloads as well. Thank you again for checking out another one of my videos, all you art geeks out there. I will talk to you again very soon.